Welcome to another DBMM battle report, and this time we've got a clash of the heavyweights of the medieval era, the early Burgundians, an Inert general version, against the War of the Roses, Henry VII. In this fight I am playing the War of the Roses army, and I'll pause at certain points so you can decide what you would do. First, let me introduce our army, War of the Roses, Henry VII version. Reason for picking Henry VII is because you can avoid the ally generals. All your generals can be sub-generals, so you don't have to worry about unreliable allies. It is 3 commands. The first one is very strong with the Knight S and the Mounted Bowman, and got the Light Horse as extra fluidity and mobility. The second command, again heavyweight, is a Bow S and Blade S command. The final command is the Pip Dump. It has a mix of troops, some Blade S, some Bow S, and the Artillery I. So hit pause on the video at this point and think about what are the strengths and weakness of our army. Welcome back. Hopefully you have had a think for yourself. That is the best way to learn. Let me give my thoughts on it. Firstly, this is a small army. It doesn't have many troops because the troops it has are expensive, so it's not going to be very wide on the battlefield. It needs to fight narrow. It's also got small ME, only 75, so it can't fight an attrition fight. It has to win with a combination of maneuver and firepower. It is powerful. It's got lots of S troops. Nearly all the troops are S, whether Knights, Bow or Blade, and it has some quick kill potential as well. In terms of overall, it's got pretty good tactical flexibility because all of the troops are regular and they are all regular command. It's not that maneuverable strategically because it doesn't have a lot of fast troops, light horse and longbow. In general, the light horse is more for filling in gaps rather than for going behind the enemy. So let me introduce our enemy, the early Burgundians, the Inert version with Charles the Bold as the leader. So we have 4 commands on this army. The first command has got a lot of the not very good Burgundian knights, the Knight I, although they are allowed to dismount. It also has a lot of bow and the artillery. So strong firepower for Command A. Command B is the pikeman. It has some Swiss, but mostly pike I, and it also has some bowmen as well. Command C is the mounted command. It has longbow and knights, Knight O, regular Knights O, and the CV. And finally, it has an ally command of some irregular French knights. All the generals are irregular, and it is an inert army, which means that all of the commands will lose a pip when they roll for command. So have a look at that army. What are its strengths and weaknesses? Hit pause on the video. So this is a huge and tough army with very high ME at 103, and it fights very wide as well since a lot of the troops can deploy in only 2 ranks. It has got lots of tough troops, the Blade S after the Knights dismount, and the Bow S and the Pike S as well as quite a few Knights. So it's big and it's tough, however it has huge weaknesses in maneuver. It's very clumsy, but you've got lots of clumsy troops. Combine that with the inert general, that will reduce the pips of every command, and add on top that we've got quite a few impetuous troops. We've got impetuous generals and we've got impetuous French knights, and this is going to be maneuver like an elephant. Very clumsy and hard to react, although it'll also be very tough like an elephant. So at this point, hit pause again and work out what is our plan and what is the terrain that we want to pick for this matchup. So this is an interesting matchup of two very different armies. Clearly we can't take the Burgundian head on, that he has too much strength and would attrition us to death. So we need to maneuver round to a flank and try and concentrate our army on one or two of his commands and rely that he will react very slowly to our moves, and we'll find it very hard to counter our maneuver. Particularly Command D, it could be a real liability. Because it's an inert army, you might roll a 1 for pips, which would be reduced to a 0, and that would mean it would automatically go impetuous in whatever position it was in. So it's going to be very hard for the Burgundian to control this army. Normally we'd want terrain to narrow down the battlefield for the War of the Roses narrow army. However, when we're up against the early Burgundians, we don't need to worry about that so much, because he will not have the ability to do wide outflanking maneuvers. He'll be too slow and clumsy. So therefore we want to leave the flanks open so that we can attack his flanks, and we don't want lots of difficult terrain that would slow down and complicate our attack. We want to leave it pretty open. So our terrain pick was some gentle hills and some boggy flats and a road, none of which should get in the way of our attack. So this is the terrain that we ended up with. The Burgundian is on the far side and the War of the Roses is on the near side. The Burgundian placed two gentle hills, the brown ones you see here with the contours, on both sides of their deployment zone to give them secure flanks to defend. We placed our bare gentle hills, one of them close to our side and the other on the Burgundian baseline. Then the Burgundian placed the built-up area in the top right to try to seal the flank a little bit, and then we placed our two boggy flats in the center to disrupt any potential Burgundian night charges. So our next challenge is to work out our battle plan and to draw our map. So pause the video while you work out your own battle plan. Our big choice here comes down to whether we are going to outflank to the left or outflank to the right. To the right, we have the advantage of our bare gentle hill to anchor our pip dump, and we have a road that might accelerate our move up the flank. There is a disadvantage of having the built-up area behind that will make it harder to sweep round to the right. On the other flank, the road is not so useful since it will be march blocked pretty quickly. But there isn't the built-up area. We decided to go right, and this was the map that we drew for our deployment. We have the mounted command on the right, ready to race around the flank. Our major fighting command is going to be going straight forward against the hill, and then our pip dump is going to be deployed behind, holding the bare gentle hill in the near ground and not moving very much from there. We rolled the deployment dice, and the Burgundians were deploying first as expected as the defender. One unusual thing, we rolled a difference of 3, which meant there were strong winds. Now that's a bit of a disadvantage since we're so reliant on bow fire. However, the strong winds were coming from the southwest, which is the direction that this camera is coming from. So that just reinforces the right choice to go right flanking, because that means that the wind will not reduce our range when we're shooting directly across or from the bottom of the board. So we will not have any disadvantage there. It does make the artillery a little bit useless because a -1 greatly reduces their chance of killing anything, but since we both have artillery, that doesn't matter. Then the early Burgundians deployed, and you can see their deployment here. They've gone very wide, deploying across the entire frontage in order to make it harder for the War of the Roses to do march moves round the flanks. They are march blocking on both sides, but it has meant that they have stretched their commands very thin. Let us have a look in detail at the 3 commands. On the far right, they have their mounted command. So we see CV set up on the right, the bowmen in the center, and the knights on the left. Now there are a couple of weaknesses to this setup that we can exploit. So just pause the video and see if you can work out what we might attack. So 3 weaknesses in their setup. Firstly, the CV have been set up forwards in front of the crest of the hill, so we can reach them in our bound and start pouring bowfire onto them. They are not far enough back that we have to get close to the edge of the hill and risk a downhill charge from the cavalry. So that is an obvious target for our bowmen. A second weakness is the longbow. Because they will be shooting into the wind, they will only have 160 paces range against the enemy who have 240 paces range. So they'll be able to be shot at without firing, very dangerous for them. The third weakness is in the knights. There is an irregular general that is with the Italian regular knights. And that is going to be tricky because the irregular general is Impetuous. So risks going forwards, and they will suck up pips and make it challenging for the knights to have a good position to charge. So given those 3 weaknesses, this looks like a great target for us to be very aggressive with the War of the Roses army. We have to beat this command before the rest of the army arrives. In the center, we have 2 commands. In the front, the pike command with the Swiss over on the right, and the pike eye in 3 ranks, and supported by some Siloi. Behind them, we see the Impetuous French ally, that is pointing to the side, so that even without pips, they will automatically move Impetuous to the right of this picture, getting them. So that is basically has expecting that we go flanking to the right, and he's counting on the knights being able to get there to support the mounted command in time. Finally, we have a huge broad infantry command. On the right are the dismounted knights, so they are irregular blade S, and behind them the bow O crossbowmen. So that is a very strong posture against any foot, since the bow O support the blade against any foot attack. Extending out the flank is the firepower, so the artillery I, 6 bowmen S, and 4 bow I. So behind the artillery is blade X, who are deadly quick-killing knights. So this is a very strong command. However, they're set up wide and they're clumsy and it's inert. So our plan will be to never fight these guys, to leave them out of the battle, and expect that they take too long to maneuver to support the rest of the army. So at this point, pause the video and think about how you are going to set up the War of the Roses army. This is what I did. We have the Command A on the left, then we have the fighting command on foot in the middle, and behind them the pip dump of the artillery and supporting troops. Now the first turn is very important to us, since we need to get the jump on the Burgundian army before they can react. So a bit of pre-measurement was required. Firstly, we measured the distance from our mounted bowmen to the CV line of the Burgundians on the hill, and worked out so that 2 forward march moves would exactly get us into bow range of the CV. Secondly, we measured from the light horse, and if they go forward 1 move, they will still not be march blocked, and they will be able to reach the road and then do a march move down the road to the flank of the mounted CV. Now that's potentially very aggressive, but if the Burgundians get bad pips, then they'll be in a lot of trouble. Our pip dice assignment is pretty easy as well. We have a very obvious pip dump in Command C for the lowest pip dice, and we want to give the highest pip dice to our maneuver command, with the light horse, the mounted bowman, and the knight S. So the middle dice is given to the foot command of bow and blade. So we roll the pip dice for our first turn, and we get a 5, 2, 1, just enough for us to execute our plan. So we, with the 2 pips, that is straightforward. We advance our foot command 2 marches in order to start putting pressure on the Burgundians on the hill. With our 5 commands, with our 5 pips for the mounted command, we can execute our attack. So we do 2 marches forward from the bowmen and the knights, which exactly gets them to range of the CV on the hill. Now that does also put them in charge range of the CV, but you have to take risks in order to win. If they charge us, then we probably will have a decent chance to survive. and they will have a tough time with the light horse behind them. We also push the light horse up the road. You can see a column of 6 light horse here. Again, they are vulnerable if the CV are able to turn and attack them. But even if I lose a couple, the CV will then be devastated by the bowman. So it is a risk worth taking. For the inert Burgundians, it all depends on the first pip dice, on how well they are able to react. And although they score well with a 6-5-5-2, unfortunately the 2 is for the mounted command, which then is reduced to a 1 as shown here in the photo. So they only have 1 pip to do something with, and remember they also have an impetuous general. So what would you do if you were the French player? You can use your pip to charge the archers, but then your general will go forwards impetuously on their own in the face of the other English longbow. Tough choice for the Burgundian player. The Burgundian player chooses to keep his knights together using the 1 pip and move them further across the hill. This does put them into bow range, but the Burgundian player recognizes he needs some strength in order to defend the hill and is hoping to be able to do downhill charges with his knights against the English. He got great pips from his foot command and used them to turn them into column and advance the blade and bow combo towards the action on the Burgundian left flank. Unfortunately, that means that he is unable to move the bowmen over in the corner, and they have to wait for another pip roll before they can join the fight. So even with a good pip roll, it is very hard for this command to get into the action. Both the Swiss and the French got good pips, and they used them in order to move towards the threatened flank. Taking position side by side, the Swiss about facing and going into a long column with the Swiss at the front and the pike eye behind, and the French knights joined them alongside. The English firing phase was a success, but not in the way that it was expected. They didn't manage any kills against the CV, despite being on a factor 7 against 3 across the line for all 4 mounted bowmen. But they were successful shooting at the Italian knights. The front one was doubled up on, so factor 7 to 3 after the success, and the one at the back was only a 7 to 4, but they managed 2 kills on the knights, greatly weakening that command. In the English next bound, the English feel confident enough to press the attack now that that command has lost 2 knights. So its archers step into range. They advance to keep the fire on the CV, and one of the light horse is able to hit the rear of the most extreme Burgundian CV. The English player has to take a few risks. For example, he's advanced the bowman to the edge of the hill, so the Burgundians will be able to charge downhill at them. But the English feel that they have to kill this mounted command quickly before the arriving pike and French are able to get into the fight. The result was, although the English archery proved disappointing this round, the light horse did manage to kill the CV that they hit from behind. The fate of the Burgundian mounted command is sealed when it rolls another 1 for pips, and that means after the inert general that is a 0. So it is not able to move anything, it just has to sit there and take the English firepower. And worse, the general, because he's impetuous and is out of range of reaching the English, has to move straight forwards along the hill. The English firepower is a bit more effective this time and kills one of the CV next to the general. The other CVs have been pushed back, but if you look, they are still not behind the crest, so they are still vulnerable to the English longbow fire. The Burgundian player decides that he needs to bring more firepower into the fight, so expends a pip to bring his regular bowmen onto the road so that they can automatically push up the road even without any pips. He also starts to deploy his pike on the edge of the hill, and his knights now deploy in order to sweep behind the hill and cover the flank. One more CV goes down to the firepower of the English longbows, and then it is the English turn. The English decide they need to finish off the Burgundian mounted command before the knights and pikes are able to get into the fight, so they push forward aggressively. Their longbow line advances to bring the entire Burgundian line on the hill under fire, and their longbows advance in order to threaten the Burgundian general. Their light horse hit the remaining CV from behind and also push forward to try to outflank the French knights. That does put one light horse within charge range of the French knights, but the light horse are beyond threat zone, so they will not be locked down when the French come forwards. The English Blade S are not playing a major part in this game, but they are supporting the flanks of the longbow and threatening the pikemen, preventing them from coming off the hill. Now we remember that because of the strong winds, the Burgundian longbowmen are not able to reach the English longbows, and the English longbows can reach the Burgundians. So they have the advantage at firing on archers who cannot fire back, which is a 6-2, and they start killing the longbow. The English light horse managed to finish off the Burgundian CV that they hit from behind. So now that command is disheartened, and the remaining light troops will go down pretty quickly. But the knights are not affected as 2ME troops. It has to happen eventually, and the French roll a 1 for pips, which is reduced to a 0. So they have no choice. The command has to go Impetuous. It's not as bad as it looks, because the knight on the left in this picture is able to hit the light horse, and the column of knights because of the extra move that it advances, is able to lock down the column of English light horse and restrict their move next turn. The knight hits the light horse from the flank. In the combat round it turns to face, but it is unable to flee when the knights win because of the light horse immediately behind it. So it is destroyed and the knights pursue into contact with the second light horse. The Burgundian mounted command is now broken, so only the general can use pips. He pulls back from his exposed position, but because he was threat zoned, he has to pull straight back, putting him square in the sights of the English longbow unit. And their shooting is on target, and they eliminate the general, shattering that command, who will now retreat off the battlefield. This puts the pikes and the French knights in a tricky position as they now lose their flank support against the might of the English longbow. The first English casualty is the light horse that the knight managed to make flee on the hill and was unable to recoil, so it was killed. When a command is routed, it makes the enemy within a certain range impetuous as they chase after it. So the sticks here show the extent of the English army that becomes impetuous as a result of the broken Burgundian command, affecting most of the two fighting commands. Now they can still move, but they need to use pips to hold any troops. The English commander makes his first mistake of the game. The light horse were caught in the threat zone of the knights, and so can only move straight forward or straight back. The English commander wants them to get behind the knights, since they are clumsy and to cause havoc in their rear, so he pushes them forward. However, they get stuck in the difficult, so are not able to clear into the open ground beyond, and the English commander is gambling that the knights get a very low pip score that would enable the knight horse to move forward and escape. Didn't need to take that gamble, since the knights probably cannot survive the longbow firepower coming for them, and they are very clumsy and hard to control with an inert general. The English light horse will pay dearly for this mistake. The English foot command thinks about going up the hill to take the fight to the pikemen, but low pips mean they have to change their formation first before advancing. In the English bound, the knights managed to spend the other light horse that they were in contact with. Unfortunately for the English light horse, the French knights roll a pip dice of 5. Now, pause the video and work out, if you were the French, what would you do? This is the great move from the French. They use their general to hit the light horse from behind. Since he's not clumsy, that only takes 1 pip. He uses the knight at the rear of the column to hit the front of the light horse at the other end. With no recoil, they will die if they are beaten. And then has 2 pips left to withdraw the knight that just killed the light horse and prevent it going into trouble. And the remaining 2 knights move impetuously forwards, but they are blocked by the general, so are able to stay under control. So he's been able to top and tail the light horse column and trap all three of them. The combat goes as expected, and both the front and rear light horse are killed, and the remaining one is sandwiched between the knights. At the top of the picture you'll see the Swiss column withdrawing. They did not have the strength to take on the English line on their own. The wind direction changed at this point and started blowing from the south, not the southwest. That means it is blowing directly up the hill from the bottom of this picture towards the top. So the bowmen who are shooting from left to right no longer have the range to reach the enemy, and so the English started to reposition. Their mounted bowmen advanced forwards onto the hill, and the remaining bowmen started to move forwards to flank the pike eye and shoot from their flank up towards the north with the wind. The knights, you see, are now coming round to protect the flank of the bowmen, now that the light horse have been taken out by the French. The Burgundians do not have the pips to get their huge foot command into the action. You can see it stalled the blade S and bow O command stalled in the middle of the picture, and in the top left you can see their bow advancing, but they are not able to get into the fight. With the death of the light horse in the night sandwich, the English have lost 4 and 1 spent of their 6 light horse. The French command gets a great pip roll and is able to reorganize against the odds, with forming back into a column and only 1 knight left outside. The English press their attack on the hill, advancing to bring bowfire on the rear of the Swiss pike column that is retreating, and also angling their bowmen so that they can still reach the full range with the wind from the south to fire against the pike eye. The English household knights form up with the CNC in order to take the French knights on head-to-head. The English had the final move of the game. They split their knights on the hill, half of them bringing the French knights under fire, and the other half turning to shoot the pike eye. Pike eye are very vulnerable to bowfire. The remaining archers deployed in order to establish a long firing line against the Burgundian pike eye. The firing resulted in 2 pike eye kills, so the final casualty count, in addition to losing the mounted command, the Burgundian also lost 2 pike eye. The Burgundians are in a tricky position. They have to charge uphill at the English with the French knights. Their pike will find it hard to retreat and are under flanking fire from the bowmen and cannot move forward, and their final foot command is stranded short of pips for launching an effective assault. So that was the end of the game, with a 14-11 victory to the English War of the Roses. Did highlight the strengths and weaknesses of these armies and was a great game. Irregular armies, clumsy armies, inert armies, all require better generalship than the nice maneuverable regular armies, because they are so you have to think so far in advance, and it is so difficult to react to your enemy. The Burgundian player gambled on their mounting command getting enough pips at the beginning to be able to pull back from its exposed position, and the English commander gambled with his light horse, and neither of those gambles paid off. So hope you enjoyed the game, and we will be back with other DBMM battle reports soon.